Welcome to Mrs. Neller's notes for her double block algebra class. These are the notes for section 6.3 entitled Solving Multi-Step Inequalities. And today we're going to solve and graph multi-step inequalities. So we might have inequalities that have addition and multiplication, or subtraction and division, or there might be some distribution. So these are going to be 2 or 3-step inequalities that we'll be solving. Now remember, when you solve multi-step equations, the very first thing that you have to do is either distribute, and that's if you have a number outside of the parentheses, or depending on what that number is, you might want to multiply by the reciprocal. Sometimes that number out in front of the parentheses that you want to distribute is a really nasty fraction, and it's easier to just multiply by the reciprocal and get rid of the fraction than it is to distribute it and get even more complicated fractions. After we do that, we'll need to combine like terms. So that way we get all of the variables on one side and all of the numbers on the other. Or we might have to combine like terms on the same side of the inequality, all of them on the left side and all of them on the right side. And then remember, we want to undo any addition or subtraction next. And our last step will be to undo multiplication or division. So these are the same steps that we had when we were solving equations. And we're going to follow them when we're solving inequalities as well. And remember, when you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, you might have to flip the inequality sign. So that was a rule that we saw yesterday in the 6.2 notes. And that rule will still apply today. So for example 1 here, we're going to solve the inequality. And we definitely want to show all our work for these. Now again, if you need to, you can box in the variable. So I have 4 times y minus 3 is less than 13. So if you want to box in the y so you know what you're trying to isolate, you can. We have to undo the subtraction first. So I have to add 3 to both sides. So now I have 4y is less than 16. And then to finish solving for y, I have to divide by the 4. Now I'm not dividing by a negative number, so I can keep my inequality as a less than. So y is less than 4. And if I graph that on the number line, I'll have 4, 5, and 3. I'll have an open circle because it's not an equal to. And then I'll shade everything to the left because that's where everything less than 4 is on the number line, and because the arrow's pointing to the left. Okay, for part B, I have to solve for x. So you can box in the x. So I have 1/4 times x plus 5 is greater than 10. I have to undo that addition first. So I'm going to subtract 5 to both sides. And then to get rid of the fraction that's being multiplied, I don't want to divide by a fraction, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. I'm going to multiply by 4/1. So x is greater than 20. And if I put that on my number line, I'll need 20 and 21 and 19. I'll need an open circle, and I'm going to shade to the right because that's where everything greater than 20 is, and because the arrow is pointing to the right. Okay, for part C, I'm going to get x by itself, and then I'm also going to have to rewrite my answer so that the variable's on the left side. So if I'm solving for x, I'll have to undo this subtracting by 12. That will be my first step. So -5 plus 12, that's 7, less than or equal to 6x. and then I have to divide by the 6. So x will be less than or equal to, oh, well, greater than or equal to 7 over 6. Now I can leave my fraction improper like that. I can't reduce it, so I'll just leave it 7 over 6. And I'm going to rewrite my inequality now. So remember the 7/6 and the x flip locations, and then I have to flip the inequality sign. Now if I'm going to graph this, remember 7/6 is really 1 and 1/6. So I'm going to graph it between 1 and 2. So if it's 1 and 1/6, it's right about there. So that's where I'll put 7/6. I'll need a solid circle, and I'm going to shade to the right. So remember, when you get a fraction or decimal for an answer, that's okay. It might be right. And when you graph it on the number line, you want to put it between the two whole numbers that it would be between. Okay, part D now. We could approach this in 2 ways. We could distribute the 3/2. 3/2 would be an okay fraction to distribute because 2 goes into 10 5 times, and then I could take 5 times 3, which would be 15. So I would get an okay number there. But if you don't want to worry about the 3/2, we can multiply both sides by 2/3. So that way we just get rid of it. So if I get rid of the fraction, then I'll have x plus 10. Keep my sign for now. And then that's really 2 over 3 times 12 over 1. So 2 times 12 is 24, and 3 times 1 is 3. So 24 over 3 is going to be 8. So remember, if you want to get rid of the fraction that's being distributed, just multiply by the reciprocal. Then to finish solving for x, I have to subtract 8. I'm sorry, subtract 10 from 8. So then I get -2 is less than or equal to x. And then I do want to flip my statement around. So I have to flip my inequality sign around as well. So in these problems, the only flipping of our inequality signs was done because we were rewriting the problem. We haven't had any where we've been multiplying or dividing by a negative number yet. So I put -2 and -1 and -3 on my number line. I'll need a solid circle, and I'm going to shade to the right. So don't forget, when you're doing these problems, show all your work, follow the same rules that we had for solving equations, and then graph your answer as well. That's the extra step that's new for inequalities. Okay, example 2 now, we're going to step it up a notch, and we're going to have 2 variables, one on each side of the inequality. We're going to solve these just like we did for equations. Let's see, for part A here, I don't have anything that I have to distribute. I don't have any fractions that I need to multiply by the reciprocal to get rid of. So I'm going to look at my left side. I don't have any like terms to combine. And on my right side, I don't have any like terms to combine. So now I have to get all my x's on one side and all my numbers on the other. Now, for inequalities, we like to get all of the variables on the left. So I'm going to add the 4x over to the other side. So that way, my variables are automatically going to be on the left side. That way I don't have to switch my inequality around as I get to the end of the problem. And then I'm going to subtract the 6 over. So 5x is less than or equal to -5. And then one more step to get the x by itself is to divide by the 5. So x is less than or equal to -1. And then you want to graph that on your number line. -1, 0, -2. We want a solid circle and shade to the left. Okay, for part B, we do have some parentheses here, and we have a 6 out front that's being distributed. So I do want to distribute that. So I'll have 6x plus 12, and then I have 3x minus 2. Now on the left side of my equation, I don't have any like terms to combine, and on the right side, I don't have any like terms to combine. So now I want to get all my variables on the left and all my numbers on the right. So I'm going to subtract the 3x over. So 3x plus 12 is greater than negative 2. And then I'll subtract the 12 to get my numbers on the same side. So 3x is greater than negative 14. And then I have to divide by 3. Now again, I'm going to get a fraction for an answer. That's okay. Don't think that just because you got a fraction for an answer that you did your work wrong. And we can leave it negative 14 over 3. But I also want to think of that in terms of a mixed number so that I know where to put it on my number line. So 3 goes into 14 4 times with 2/3 left over. So this would really be negative 4 2/3. So knowing that helps me place this number on the number line. So I'll have negative 3 and negative 4 and negative 5. So negative 4 2/3 is probably right about there. So that's where my negative 14 over 3 would go. And I'll have an open circle, and I will shade to the right. So all of these little steps that we've been doing in the past with equations and now with the inequalities are starting to come together in bigger problems that have multiple steps to them. This problem had 3 steps that we had to do. We had to distribute, and then combine our variables, and then combine our numbers. Okay, one last problem. It's a word problem. It says that a rectangle has a length of 9 meters and a width of x meters. So I'm going to draw a picture of that before I go any further. I'm going to draw a picture of a rectangle. It has a length of 9 meters and a width of x meters. Okay. The perimeter of the rectangle. Okay, now perimeter means I add up all the sides. So my other side's going to be a 9, my other side's going to be an x. So I'm going to add those all up. So I'll have 9 plus x plus x. Okay, so that's my perimeter. The perimeter of the rectangle is no less than 26 meters. No less than. So that means it would have to be equal to 26 or greater than 26 if it's not less than. So I'm going to write greater than or equal to 26. So the perimeter, here's my perimeter, no less than. So I can't be less than. I can be equal to and I can be greater than 26. Okay, so write and solve an inequality. So we already wrote the inequality. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit by combining my like terms. So I'll have 9 and 9 is 18, and x is 2x. And then I'm going to solve this for x. So I'll subtract the 18. That's good because now my x, my variable, is all by itself on the left side. Okay, 26 minus 18 is going to be 8. Now I do have to divide it by the 2 to finish getting the x completely by itself. So x is greater than or equal to 4. Now it just says to find the value of x. So it doesn't say to graph it on a number line. If we did graph it on a number line, you'd want a solid circle and you'd want to shade to the right. You'd put the solid circle on 4, and then you'd also have 5 and 3 as the other numbers on your number line. Okay. So that means if we wanted this rectangle to have a perimeter of no less than 26 meters and we wanted the other two sides to both stay 9, we'd need the x sides, the width, to be at least 4. So it'd have to be 4 or more than that in order to meet these requirements. So in your homework tonight, you will see some word problems like that where they want you to write the inequality and then solve it. It'll be an inequality that'll have multiple steps, so it could have 2 or 3 or 4 steps to it. If you have ones related to geometry, draw a picture that will help you write the inequality. And if you have any questions on these problems, come by and see us before school.